Hi, Lara. Hi, Linda. Does our guest also have her, that sign-in information?
Does who?
You have the, guest coming with Linda?
I don't know if they've.
It looks like Linda is on.
I
Mhm.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both registered, but we didn't get the link. And so I sent what you sent me, Melissa,
Yes. Yep.
onto Paige.
Okay.
Okay.
That should
Sorry
work.
about that. Usually it comes right after the registration. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I don't either. I searched around, I didn't see it. Anyway, we got it worked out. So,
Good.
Melissa, are, who is the lady that says LWV Nashville?
That's me. I'm Laura Webb.
Oh, Laura. LARA. I remember you now.
Yes.
Sorry.
No
Sorry.
problem. I'm gonna make Linda, I'm gonna make you a co-host,
Okay.
and I'm gonna make so that you share your screen?
I was
She's,
hoping
yeah,
Melissa would share her screen.
Okay.
yeah.
Is that good?
Yes, I have it if you want to give me that admin right.
Okay. Yep, I've got it. I sent it to you. You should be good.
And we are recording already, right?
Mhm.
Mhm. Thank you for working the slides, Melissa.
Yes.
I don't see Paige yet.
Laura, will you be able to stay or do you have to jump off?
Let's go look at my work calendar. I believe that I can stay today.
Wonderful. How many people RSVP'd, or is that how you do it?
Well, we typically, so that goes out to the invitation goes out to our mailing list. And then they just, through that automated process, register with Zoom. And then we count how many people are in attend, it shows how many sign-ins that we'll have. So we'll see that in just a little bit after we get going here. So we've got about, 7 or 8 minutes or so, 6 or 7 minutes. If you've got other things, if you want to check with Paige or, I'm just here eating my lunch. We try to get organized slightly ahead of the jump.
Okay, I'll text her.
I'm gonna pause the recording until we start
Okay.
for real.
Everyone.
We're ready.
Okay, great. So if we can have everyone put their microphones on mute, there's a little icon down at the very bottom of your Zoom screen for that. I'm Melissa Hanson. I share the Hot Topic portfolio with Karen Weickert. She's not able to be here today, so I am hosting for our November 1st Friday. And today we are going to feature Linda McFayden-Ketchum speaking on common sense gun laws. Linda is the volunteer co-lead for legislative work for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Tennessee. Moms Demand Action is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that respect the Second Amendment and protect people from gun violence. As legislative co-lead, she works with other Tennessee moms to pass common sense gun laws in Tennessee and to defeat gun bills that would endanger Tennesseans. Before taking on the legislative role, Linda served as chapter leader for 5 years, and she started Moms Demand Action groups in Nashville, in Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville, the Tri-Cities, Williamson County, Murfreesboro, and Cookeville. We also have Paige Flagger, and I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. She'll be joining us. Paige is a reporter at WPLN, and right now is working with ProPublica on a 2-year project about the ties between domestic violence and our gun dispossession law. So on an added note of urgency, I'll remind everyone that the Supreme Court will hear the Rahimi case on November 7th next week. Linda and Paige, I'm sure, will have much to share on this important ruling, where the Supreme Court is actually deciding if a federal law prohibiting possession of firearms by people subject to domestic violence protection orders is constitutional. So in other words, if an abuser has a protection order or restraining order against them, can they legally keep their guns? And we know all too often that those guns are used in further crimes against those who sought protection. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda and Paige and start the slide deck, hopefully. You know, it's always a crapshoot, right?
Yes. I'm sure it will be fine.
Okay,
There
and
you
are
go.
we seeing this in slide? Yes, I think so.
Very
And
good.
I'll be monitoring the chat, everyone. So if you have questions, we do ask you to keep on mute. I'm sure that Linda will, pause here and there for any comment, but you can put your questions into the chat at any time, and I'll make sure that we get to those at the end of the session. So go ahead, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks to the League of Women Voters. We consider you a strong partner in our work, and we are grateful for that. Let's go on and get started, Melissa. And thank you for running the slides.
Has it advanced for you? No. Did it advance?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There you go.
Okay.
Just quickly, for those of you who don't know about Moms Demand Action, we are an 11-year-old national organization dedicated to lowering the death and injury rate from shootings. We're a baby organization compared to the League, and we know it. We honor your work for the last 100 and some years. We were begun just after Sandy Hook, which was in December of 2012 by Shannon Watts, who was a stay-at-home mom who was very, very concerned about what happened in Connecticut and wanted to find a grassroots organization that would work to prevent such tragedies. And she couldn't find anything, so she started Moms Demand Action. Before too long, we were picked up by Everytown for Gun Safety, which is our umbrella organization. There are 10 million of us now. We're in every state. You certainly don't have to be a parent or even a woman to join. We're mothers and others. Next slide. There's a lot to talk about when we talk about gun violence. So I've thought hard and long about how to handle all of this, and I don't want to overwhelm you because it is such a terrible subject. There's not a lot of good news. But what I want to talk about is how we in Tennessee got to guns everywhere and what that means. Just quickly, what the rules are, who can purchase, who can carry. Then we'll get to the most important part for us this day, which is our domestic violence gun dispossession law and the Rahimi case coming up next week. And that's when Paige will be so helpful to us. If we have time, we can talk about extreme risk orders. And then at the end or somewhere in here, I would like to hear from you. I'm interested in how you may have changed something in your daily life because of our gun violence epidemic. Um, I, as I say, it's a grim subject. I will stop periodically so we can all breathe and get centered. And if there are questions in the chat or that anybody wants to just chime out and share, that would be fine with us. Okay, how did we get to guns everywhere? And what is it? Guns everywhere is just our term for states that are very poorly regulated, where guns are easy to get. And oftentimes training is not required for those guns to be carried. And we're definitely at guns everywhere in our state, such that even 18 to 20-year-olds can now carry concealed or openly with no training. That was the result of a court case in East Tennessee earlier this year. Very unfortunate. And you probably know, but we need to remind ourselves that guns are the leading cause of death in America now for children and young people. That's never happened. It used to be car crashes, but we worked on car crashes. We worked on automobile safety. We worked on highway safety. We wanted to get the numbers down, and we did. In between 2012 and 2021, there was a 39% increase in gun violence in our nation, and we topped that with a 52% increase in our state. We are 12th in the nation for gun deaths overall. In 2020, 30 women in our state were shot dead by an intimate partner, and 71% of all intimate partner deaths are by gun. All right, next slide. This one is close to my heart as a former teacher. In 2022, 17 of our children were involved in unintentional shootings because an adult left a gun unsecured. 9 of those children died, 8 lived. 2 of the children were 2 years old. People think that little children cannot fire semi-automatic handguns. Well, they do, and they can. And that's what happened in these cases. They can't fire shotguns and hurt themselves probably, but they can fire modern semi-automatic handguns, which is what everybody wants to have now. In our state, 54% of all gun deaths are suicides. The number is 6 out of 10 nationwide, and there are about 65 gun suicides daily. Middle-aged and older white men are more at risk for this, and veterans make up a large number of these deaths, mostly because many of them are gun owners. They know how to handle guns, and many of them are in emotional distress. In a Vanderbilt poll, 2/3, I think, of the respondents said they thought that they knew somebody or somebody they knew would be shot, someone close to them, which, our state is filling up with survivors. Okay, next slides. So how did we get where we are? We got where we are because human beings made certain decisions. People wanted to make money selling guns. People designed guns and advertised them in very appealing ways. Lawmakers, got relaxed and didn't pass laws that would keep us safe and did pass laws that would endanger us. And so all this has happened in our state since about 1995, which isn't that long. It's always been legal to have a gun in your home for home protection. I think that's the case. I haven't found anything to the contrary. But we don't know how many people in our state have guns in their homes because we don't track that. But until the mid-90s, it was illegal to carry outside of the home unless you were a law enforcement officer, and with a few other exceptions. And if you were one of those people, you could only carry the gun in your hand. You couldn't carry concealed, and it couldn't be in a holster. Okay, then in the mid-90s, the legislature, Tennessee General Assembly, enacted a law authorizing the sheriffs to issue permits. And you all know that sheriffs are elected officials. the permits that they issued were all different, and they applied only in their county. So that was a bit of a mess. There was confusion and unhappiness after that. And so in 1996, the legislature gave the State Department of Safety and Homeland Security authority for our permitting system. And that's where it is today. And, you know, like I said, since all of these things happened, our gun laws have been relaxed. So who can't purchase a gun right now in our state? And some of these are federal prohibitions. People with felony or stalking convictions, people who are fugitives from the law, people convicted of hate crimes, domestic abusers subject to an order of protection. That's what we call it here. Other states call it restraining order. Undocumented non-citizens, anybody who's been committed to a mental institution or deemed mentally defective. That's not our word, that's in the law. It's old and kind of offensive. And people who are addicted to or are illegally using drugs and alcohol. And I know one of you is going to ask, how in the world do we keep up with that? And the answer is, I do not know. We need to know that, but we all know people who are addicted to illegal drugs and alcohol. Anyway, we hope they don't have guns. Next slide. Okay, who can legally purchase or carry? You have to be 18 to purchase a long gun. And, you know, we're a hunting state, and in many families give their children hunting guns, no problem. We have no problem with that. But to buy one for yourself, you have to be 18. If you want to purchase a handgun, because of the recent court case that I mentioned, you can carry, you have to be 21 to buy. But if you have one illegally or someone gives you one, you can possess it openly or concealed at 18, 19, or 20 in most places. If you purchase from a federally licensed firearm dealer, you must undergo a background check. That's a good thing. If you purchase from a private seller online or at a gun show or at a parking lot, you do not have to undergo a background check. This is the gun show loophole, and these sales are legal. And this is how a lot of people are getting guns who shouldn't or couldn't get one legally. I'm looking at the time. Okay, good. Training, safety training. Well, if you carry without a permit, which is permitless carry, you don't have any training requirement at all. And remember that 18-year-olds can do this. But if you want to be a responsible gun owner and know what you're doing, the Department of Safety does administer 2 levels of gun permits, enhanced and concealed carry. I'm not going to go into the differences, but concealed carry is the better of the 2. Enhanced is the one, no, I have that backwards. Enhanced is the better of the 2. The concealed carry permit allows you to watch a 90-minute video about gun safety and get a permit. We don't care for that. A lot of people are still getting permits because you need one if you want to carry your gun across state lines, because the states have all these reciprocity arrangements with one another about who can bring a gun in and who cannot. And, you know, states with better gun laws than ours, they don't want people coming in who have no permit at all. You know, they want smart gun owners coming in. And, you know, there's the website for the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security to learn more about gun permits. Are there any questions? Let's take a breath or comments at this point. I'm not looking at the chat. Oh, does anybody want to chime in?
I just want to mention Wilson County has a very active new Moms Demand Action group. And they have spoken to law enforcement. They have actively promoted the Be Smart for gun storage. Linda, do you want to talk about what that is? I understand there's just been legislation about no tax on gun locks and gun safes.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I will talk about Be Smart a little later in the what you can do section. But yes, Wilson County has a wonderful new moms group, and they are working hard and very active and on fire, I would say. And yes, as of yesterday, there will never again be tax on gun safety equipment, safes, locks, whatever, and unless the legislature changes its mind. That holiday is permanent now, and that's wonderful. That's something. If we're going to be full of guns, we ought to be
Linda,
full of safes. Uh-huh.
I understand Tennessee is hit number 1 in guns being stolen from cars now. We're the number 1 state,
Wow.
and that's something to.
No surprise.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I guess just the numbers off the top of my head. The FBI actually keeps track of guns stolen from cars, and they have this interesting graphic. I think it's the top 20 cities in the country where guns are stolen most often from cars. And 4 Tennessee cities make the top 15. So it's Memphis, Chattanooga, Jackson, and Nashville.
Great. Okay, next slide. Okay, where can you not carry? And gun owners who wish to carry are supposed to understand these rules and be responsible for them. I don't know how else they would know. It's complicated. Judicial and federal buildings, public schools and buses, property owned or operated or in use by a school. So, if Lawson High School wants to have a track meet at Percy Warner Park, that's a school event. There would be no guns allowed at that event. But how many of the parents know that? Private schools posted no firearms allowed. Anywhere, if you're drinking or under the influence of drugs, you shouldn't be carrying. Public recreational buildings, civic centers, all other government buildings, and any private business or residence that wants to post no firearms allowed is free to do so. We can still do that. Okay, next slide.
And Linda, you told me one time, and I do it every time I see this, is whenever you see that on a building, to go in and thank the owner, get to the manager, owner, and say how much you appreciate that. It really, it seems they are like, well, wow, thank you. They really seem to appreciate that. So whenever you see that, just one minor little thing you can do to maybe raise
You're right.
awareness.
So thank the manager when you see no firearms allowed on the door. Good idea, Roseanne. So domestic violence and guns, we're getting really grim here. We just have finished National Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October. And with Rahimi coming up next week, this is what we really wanted to focus on today. Domestic violence is very deeply interconnected with all kinds of communities, and it's complicated. But we know that access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely that a woman will die in a domestic incident. Strangulation is something that we've been learning about lately. It is a pretty prevalent form of violence toward women who are in abusive relationships, and women who have been strangled are much more likely to be shot. It seems to be sort of a precursor in many cases. Women of color, Latino women, Indigenous Alaska Native women are disproportionately affected by domestic violence and guns and a lot of other social ills. In almost half of all of the mass shootings that are happening in our country, the perpetrator is shooting intimate partner, family members, children. And, yeah, that's just awful. In 2020, we had 30 women fatally shot in our state with a gun. And we know that 71% of intimate partner homicide victims were killed with a gun in our state, compared to 66% nationwide. So it's pretty bad. Next slide. Thank you. I'm going to just kind of run through what our current law is that we hope will not change or not go away. And then Paige is going to come in and tell us a story or give us some more insight. I think Kathy Walsh, who used to be at the Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, should get the credit for a fairly decent domestic violence gun dispossession law that we have. It's been around, I want to say 20 years. I might be wrong there. So we have something good to work with, but it is not well enforced. And the law requires that a judge who has issued an order of protection or a restraining order has to tell the respondent, or that's the abuser, that they must get rid of their guns, all of them, by some legal means within 2 days. This happens in the court. If you want to go down to General Sessions Court, and I recommend you do, it's very interesting. On days when they're doing orders of protection, you will hear our judges instructing respondents to get rid of their guns. They'll first say, do you have any? And hope they're telling the truth. If they do, they tell them they have to get rid of them. And I can say our judges do that very consistently. So the next thing the respondent has to do is fill out a piece of paper, returning it to the court in a day or two, telling whether or not they have guns, and if they do, what they did with them. So if they don't have guns and they're honest, all they'll do is check the box that says, I do not have guns, and pass that in. But then if they do have guns, the respondent can ask law enforcement or a federally licensed firearm dealer to hold their guns, but they may also ask their Uncle Fred to hold their guns, a third party. And on our affidavit, that person is not identified. So people are turning in forms saying, I gave my guns to a third party, but I'm not going to tell you who he or she is. This is a huge problem. And the respondent may not rearm. The respondent must not go out and buy new guns. They may not have guns for the length of the order, which is typically a year, but could be 6 months. So that's where we are now. Let's go on to the next slide. I'll do these problems and then Paige, you chime in. So these are just the top 4, in my opinion. We don't know about judges across the state, how they are, if they're actually instructing respondents. We hope so, but I don't know of any monitoring project. We've monitored it in our county, and it's General Sessions courts. Whoever wanted to know that, over in the A.A. Birch building, there are 3 judges who handle, I believe it's 3, all of the orders of protection requests. And then there is a circuit court magistrate, I think it's Circuit Court 4 in the courthouse, who handles them also. But I would say go to A.A. Birch, to General Sessions Court, if you really want to see how this plays out in our county. But we don't know about other counties. The state keeps no track of people who die in shootings with guns that the shooter wasn't supposed to have. That would be such an interesting thing to know. The court does not go after respondents who don't turn in that affidavit, to my knowledge. And if the respondent does return the affidavit and has dispossessed to a third party, we don't know who that person is, so we can't check to see if that really happened. It could all be false. Okay, next slide, and let me introduce, oh gosh, let's go back a slide. That's too many words. Let me introduce Paige Plager, who I have met in our mom's work. She is a young, wonderful reporter at WPLN who is steeped in all of this. And we are grateful for what you're doing, Paige.
Thank you so much, Linda. And hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. Yeah, like Linda said, I am a reporter. I'm the criminal justice reporter at WPLN, which is the NPR station for Middle Tennessee. And I'm currently on a fellowship with ProPublica, which is an investigative nonprofit outlet. You might know them from some of their work covering the Supreme Court and some of the conflicts of interest with the Supreme Court justices. And they also partner with local newsrooms like ours, basically to pay my salary to do deep dive investigative work. And right now I'm on this fellowship with them, actually trying to answer what is number 2 on this slide, which is the number of people who are killed in domestic violence shootings who were barred from having a weapon at the time of the homicide. And so the work that we're doing is part of the reason that the government doesn't track this is because it's really incredibly difficult to identify how often someone who's been barred from having a weapon has gone on to use that weapon to kill someone. So we're looking at a selection of homicides, domestic violence, gun homicides specifically from 2001 until 2021 in Tennessee. So over a 20-year period, more than 1,000 people were killed in domestic violence gun shootings. And so far we've analyzed the cases from here in Davidson County in Nashville, and we found that approximately 40% of all domestic violence gun shootings that have happened in Nashville were committed by someone who was barred from having a weapon. And they can be barred from having a weapon for multiple different reasons. Orders of protection, which we're going to be talking about more because that's what's up for debate in this Rahimi case. There are also like felony prohibitions if you've been convicted of a felony in the past, and then domestic violence misdemeanors. But really what that number shows us is that 40% of those homicides were preventable. Those people shouldn't have had guns, and they were still able to get a gun, and they were able to kill their intimate partner. And oftentimes in these cases, the women, the children who died knew that this was coming. They went to the court, they went to the police, they said, I need help. This person is dangerous and they have a gun. But we have very few mechanisms, and there is very little political will for people like police officers, courts, judges to actually do the follow-up work in order to make sure that that person no longer has the gun. And probation and parole actually comes into play with that as well. So like Linda was saying, we do know that in Davidson County, that it's actually the majority of cases where the person was ordered to dispossess, they don't turn the affidavit back in at all, saying whether or not they dispossessed, and there isn't a follow-up mechanism to make sure that that's happening. So like Linda was saying, we have on the books actually a fairly decent domestic violence law. However, there's just very little enforcement of that. And as a result, we know that people are dying. And so with this Supreme Court case that we're about to see oral arguments on Tuesday, we're actually talking about whether or not orders of protection, which, as we said, it's in general sessions courts, it's a civil process, whether or not orders of protection should be able to strip someone of their gun rights. And to give a little bit of more numbers, unless you're on number overload, we do know that orders of protection in Nashville are actually really quite effective at protecting women against abusers with guns. So from 2007 to 2021, more than 20,000 orders of protections were signed in Nashville's civil courts. But when I looked at that same period of time and I looked at domestic violence gun homicides, only 3 of the cases that I was looking at where there was a fatality did the person have an order of protection. So that means that only 3 cases where someone did have that order of protection in place did the violence escalate to the point where they got shot and killed. So that should tell you 20,000 versus 3, that these orders of protection are really one of the best protections for women, for children, for victims when it comes to trying to protect themselves from an abuser with a gun.
Yeah, that is quite a statistic.
Yes.
All right, let's go on to this very wordy slide. I'm sorry. I won't read this. And Paige, chime in if I leave something out.
Yeah.
So you know about the Bruin case, which was settled or issued a couple of years ago, which has turned our current gun understanding of gun law kind of upside down and created a lot of confusion. And that's the basis of this Rahimi argument we'll hear on Tuesday. The Bruin case said that for current law to be constitutional, there has to be a match or a twin back in 1791 so that, oh, this is hard to explain, to make new law constitutional. So in the case of Rahimi, he was a guy in Texas with a lot of gun charges, and he was an abuser. His girlfriend, I guess, did have an order of protection against him that but he continued to possess his guns. He didn't turn them in. And the police charged him with a federal crime because he had not turned in his guns. And he asked that to be dismissed. And the Fifth Circuit, which is Texas, Louisiana, and maybe Mississippi, I'm not sure, upheld the law and said, no, we're going to reject your claim. You should have turned in your guns. You are an abuser and you shouldn't have them. But then along came Bruin, which turned everything on its end. And the Supreme Court agreed to hear Rahimi's case. And basically what he is saying is that domestic abusers have a right to possess guns, even if they are subject to orders of protection. The lawyers for the government, for us, are going to say that the law requiring dispossession is constitutional, even if there's no historical match for it from the 18th century, because it fits into a broad historical tradition of disarming dangerous people, like Rahimi, who are not law-abiding, responsible citizens. You know, women didn't have citizenhood. We weren't full people in 1791. I don't know that there were domestic violence laws back then. I think men could be fined if they.
I can actually answer this for you, Linda.
Please do.
Yeah, in 1791, I interviewed a historian about this because I was curious if women in domestic violence situations, what rights they had back then. And you could go to a magistrate and you could say, hey, my partner is abusing me. Can you do something about this? And there could be some kind of intervention that was largely not criminal. But the thing that is really interesting is, like, when we're looking at a historical twin, if you're looking for a law back in 1791 that barred abusers, domestic violence abusers, from having access to a gun, you're not going to find it. And the reason you're not going to find it is because domestic violence homicides in 1791 were not committed with guns. guns were too cumbersome. They were generally long range weapons. They weren't effective for close up, fighting and assaults. One researcher tried to set out to find cases from 1791 where a woman was killed by their husband with a gun, and all they could find was one case where a woman was beaten with a musket, not even
Oh.
shot with it. And so, this situation is it is sort of I mean, I think people have called it absurd because it's like you can't find this exact thing because that wasn't something that people were trying or worried about regulating in 1791.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, no twin for that. That it is absurd. Anyway, the reference at the bottom is SCOTUS blog is where I got all this information. You might want to check it out. It's short and full of information. It is a random standard. Oh boy.
Linda, would it be helpful for me to just talk through kind of what the possibilities are as far as the outcome of the Rahimi case
Yes.
here in Tennessee?
Yeah.
So I published an article today actually with ProPublica about the Rahimi case, which I can link you guys in the chat. But essentially there are like 3 possible outcomes. And I'll tell you kind of how they would play out in Tennessee. One possible outcome is that the justices rule against Rahimi. The system continues functioning as it is. So Rahimi loses the Supreme Court case, nothing really changes. Another option would be that the court would rule similarly to the Fifth Circuit Court, which said essentially that the federal ban was unconstitutional, but they didn't address what the state ban would happen. So right now, even though the Fifth Circuit said, we don't think that domestic abusers should be barred from having guns under this federal prohibition, Texas still has its own state laws about orders of protection barring abusers from having guns, and those are still standing. So it's possible that that would be the way that it would play out. So those are kind of the 2 potential outcomes there. The most dangerous possible outcome would be if the Supreme Court rules that any type of gun restriction tied to orders of protection specifically are a violation of the Second Amendment, which could potentially both get rid of the federal prohibition, and it could also have really intense ramifications across every state's laws, especially if those laws are similar to the federal prohibition, which would result in Tennessee losing that law that Linda was talking about how abusers who are subject to orders of protections lose access to their guns or ordered to give up their guns. So it would put that in jeopardy. And as a result, it would also very likely put a lot of people's lives in danger as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So that's Rahimi. Tuesday is the day, and I believe the oral arguments are at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. So 7:30 for us. And we can listen. We can't see anything, but we can listen. Next slide, please. I think we'll skip extreme risk protection order laws just in the interest of time. We can always come back and talk about them. But let's talk about what you can do to help. Put 988 in your phone. That's the suicide lifeline. And you don't want to be searching around for that number if somebody's in trouble. Continuing on the suicide theme, if someone you know seems sad and depressed, encourage them to tell you how they're feeling. Ask if they're thinking of ending their life. There's no harm in this. It could help. The domestic violence hotline is still a long number. It's 800-799-7233. That is a number you might also need at some point. Karen had asked me about what we could do if we have a gun in our home that we don't want anymore. And I checked in with Metro. If you have a gun or ammunition that you don't want, just call them. They will send an officer to your home. They'll fill out a report and they'll take the gun away and the ammunition. Do not go to the precinct with your gun. Let them come to your house. They're happy to do that. We also have a gun retrieval program going in the county, mostly in local churches, where you can turn in an unwanted gun. And if the link will take you to that program with more information. This is back to what Roseanne was saying. Ask about guns in the home where you might be leaving your grandchildren or your children to visit. And please go to besmartforkids.org. That is our adult training program about safe gun storage. We have no problem with people owning guns, but if you're going to own a gun, you have to responsibly store it always. It can never be out of your personal control. Judges are elected. All of our judges are elected. And so when it's election time, ask candidates how they feel about disarming abusers. How do they feel about gun dispossession of people who are domestic abusers? We want people who really care about this on the bench. Right now in general sessions and in circuit, we have that. We have judges, mostly women in general sessions, but yeah, and in circuit too, women who are serious about this and they get it. Some of them have a background in domestic violence advocacy. We're very, very lucky to have them. But yeah, and the sheriff is elected too. And the sheriff could do a lot more than the sheriff's doing now. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's move on. And I'd love to hear from y'all about, anything that you think about as a result of this. But I'm really interested in your daily goings on. Have you changed anything? Can we just go out? Can we take everybody off mute? Or how do you want to do that, Melissa? So people can speak about this or anything else.
Unmute all.
Thank you. I'll start. I've got a Post-it note on my vehicle on the dashboard that says exit plan. This is unfortunate, but it's my reminder that when I get out of my truck and go wherever I'm going, I need to have an exit plan. I need to know where the doors are. I need to know how I'm going to get to the doors. And I need to know, what I'm going to do if I hear gunfire. That's not a good way to live, but that's what I'm doing. What about y'all?
Hi, this is Jordan Smith. I find it incredibly appalling that in Williamson County, Franklin, as well as I think I read in the paper that Davidson County now are offering active shooter classes for the general public. It's so disconcerting that people feel the need to do that. Frankly, I'm scared to go into large crowds in Tennessee because of so many people here carry guns, particularly if there's drinking involved. But just the recent thing that there are active shooter classes being offered, if that doesn't put everybody's hair on fire, I don't know what's going to.
Yeah, it's definitely the wrong end of things, isn't it? It's like we have an allergy to prevention. as human beings. We just can't get in front of problems. We have to let them get to where they are now and then offer active shooter training. I mean, that's just not an appealing idea. Who else?
I often wonder, I see in the chat that Paige has said, that some of our behaviors, like in the car, not, because you never know when you're going to be at the end of a road rage kind of incident. But I also, going into like a fast food restaurant and you see someone with a gun on their hip, and I just usually just turn right around. But I'm also thinking about, well, that's a tremendous burden on what are typically, young people working in places like, who's going to enforce the no firearms allowed inside a premise? It's just creates another situation for negative interaction with a gun holder, when they refuse the signs. And I know years ago when our church was thinking of putting, a gun-free zone kind of, signage out. Well, does that now make us a target? Those are, some of the things that just now are permeating our lives.
Yeah.
Am I off the mute?
Yes.
Elizabeth? Okay. As you know, I live in Wilson County. And if you live in Wilson County, you can fire a gun on your property. And my response to that has always been that when I hear it, I call the sheriff, and they're very good about coming out and making sure that whoever is firing the gun is doing it in a safe manner. So at least we can get that far. So, and I brought this up at a Wilson County moms meeting, and there's so many people that are new to the area that hear the gunfire and don't understand what's going on. So just wanted to make sure you knew it's legal in Wilson County to fire a gun on your property.
And does the sheriff consistently show up at your home?
They do. I just
That's
had,
great.
I had somebody come just 2 weeks ago when Wilson County was off of school. And I'm familiar with, I know who has guns and who shoots them and that they have proper protection, but this was different. And the sheriff came out and kind of cruised the neighborhood, and the gunfire stopped.
Mhm.
So other times they've come by and they know who's got the proper safety measures, and they let me know. But this time they couldn't figure out who it was because whoever saw the sheriff stopped shooting. So yeah, I just want to let people know it's okay to call the sheriff when you hear gunfire. Even
Yeah,
if the target shooting, it's worth making sure that it's done safely.
that's right. We call it into Metro Police whenever we hear gunfire in our neighborhood. And I don't think it is legal in our little urban neighborhood to be shooting target practice in the backyard. So it's not legal. They sometimes send a car, but not always.
Yeah.
Linda, this is Barbara Gay. My husband and I were talking about going to Washington, D.C. to spend some time in the new African American Museum and also the Smithsonian. But the crime rate is really up in D.C. And I don't know, it just kind of made us hesitate. We haven't made a decision yet, but I think it's like all these other experiences that we're all feeling. We think about it. It is affecting our daily life.
Yeah. I think the Smithsonian bars guns, but still you'd have to get from the museum to the hotel or yeah.
I put a message in the chat about next week, November 7th. that we're going to have a speaker, and Linda, this may be somebody that you've had. It's and I can't remember his name. I wrote it down someplace. I can't find it. Melvin, he's a retired veteran, and he's going to be speaking on suicide among veterans. And we know that that's, and you've alluded to that also. So if anybody's interested, it's in the chat. November 7th from 6 to 8 in the evening in Lebanon.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Anne. I'm just looking at Amy's. Amy has quit grocery shopping in person. Wow. Just use curbside pickup. And you note what your daughter is wearing every day. Oh gosh.
That was a heartbreaking one after Uvalde. I just started she's wearing.
And the point being that automatic weapons do so much damage, it's sometimes hard to identify, especially little kids. Yeah, weren't they using DNA after Uvalde? Oh my goodness, where we are. Oh,
Linda, there's one question in the chat about getting a copy of the presentation slides. I'll leave that to you, whether you want to share this. We can take care of that for doing it, but you know, based on your granting permission for that.
oh, it's fine, Melissa.
Okay.
That's fine. And Meg isn't going to large events. Yeah. Not going to fireworks downtown, right? Mm-mm. And you put a bulletproof insert in your daughter's backpack. Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, you just, as a mom, you're just going, what can I possibly do to, it hopefully it never comes to that, but do anything I could have done. I don't want to wish I could have done something different later. So
Yeah. I think about it a lot in church. I sing in the choir, and we sing up in a balcony with only one entrance and exit. We're sitting ducks is what we are. And I have a friend who was shot in church. So it's something I know happens. And it really distresses me sometimes. It comes over me during the service when I'm trying to be in this, you know, safe sanctuary. And all I can think about, or I see somebody down there with a gun, and I'm thinking, if he comes up here, we're all dead because we can't come down there. There's no exit. The fire marshal has us hang this little Velcro, you know, fold up ladder that you would unfurl down one floor. And can you see anybody over 30 getting down that? I can't. I'm not doing that. You know, my husband says, well, with adrenaline, you could do it. And I'm thinking, no, I couldn't. I hate this. I hate it.
Yeah.
You know, we're nonpartisan, but you all know the answer to this problem. One of the big answers is better elected officials, better lawmakers who have gun sense. And next summer, we will have a chance to clean house, if we will, and maybe not clean house, but flip some seats and get some of these people out who are not going to do anything to help us.
There's also in this week's issue of the Nashville Scene, it's available online, a very extensive article on gun laws and consequences in Tennessee. It's a very informative read in the NashvilleScene.com.
Thank you. If you want to join us, and we'd love to have you, just text READY to 64433. I skipped that one. And that is the end of what Paige and I have to share today.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and sharing this information and, the heartfelt comments in the chat too. It's heartbreaking, frustrating, infuriating, all at the same time of the situation that we find ourselves in Tennessee. And as Linda mentioned, one of the things that can start to address it is elected officials who recognize the problem. So that's why every single vote counts. I want to, this recording will be available soon. There's on the League of Women Voters Nashville site. We'll have a summary of today's meeting in the voter. If you're getting that as a member, we welcome you to join and get it automatically. Otherwise, those are posted as archived items a couple weeks after that goes out. Next month, we will meet on December 1st is the first Friday of the month. And we wish we could find something that was uplifting and I'm working on it for the end of the year session. But I think even in the face of how devastating, gun violence is that it pays dividends for each and every one of us to increase our own knowledge, share those conversations with those who we associate and love, take up the banner of, demanding action and, doing what we can to inform the electorate whenever you have a chance to have a conversation. It's great to have some information like this that's factual. And to have some of, as hard as it is to remove the emotional component for it, I think people do respond to the facts. And I appreciate you having compiled so many for us today. So thank you, Linda. Thank you, Paige, for coming. And we'll be looking for, when the ProPublica project is complete or, any reporting out of that. I hope you keep us informed so that we can also share that through our channels.
Absolutely.
Appreciate everyone's time today.
Melissa,
Yes.
could you stop sharing and could we take a photograph?
Let's see.
There we go. Can you do it, Amy?
Of course I can. All right, okay, we've got everybody on one screen.
And let's show ourselves.
Now's the time to turn on your camera, folks.
Be quick, I promise. Oh, you still got
Oh yeah, people are showing themselves.
All right, I hope that's everybody. All right, I'll do it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks everyone for
Thanks,
caring about
everyone.
this.
Have a good weekend.